Is now member of the Armed Services and Judiciary Committees, Democratic Senator Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut. Senator, thanks for being on the show this morning.
Thank you, Mika.
So you're going to be watching Donald Trump Jr. During this interview, not participating at all. What are you hoping to hear?
What I'm hoping to hear is some answers to questions about the June 9th meeting that he attended, indeed helped organize with Jared Kushner and campaign chairman Paul Manafort, and of course 2 foreign agents who came promising incriminating evidence about Hillary Clinton. But equally important, what happened afterward? Who said what to whom then, and what meetings and other potential coordination was there afterward by way of providing information or in the social media world, such as Facebook, compromising or coordinating the Trump digital operations with the Russians. And that really is an area that I think is tremendously important, growingly important.
Senator Blumenthal, it's Willie Geist. Good to see you this morning. What are the penalties for Donald Trump Jr. not telling the truth? What are the rules that you all have set around his testimony?
Any individual who lies to a congressional committee is subject to the penalties of 18 United States Code 1001, which punishes an individual who fails to tell the truth to a government official in this kind of circumstance. And that could be punishable by several years in prison and fines.
And so inside this meeting that Donald Trump Jr. accepted with, as you call them, foreign agents, attended also by Jared Kushner, attended also by Paul Manafort, based on what you know publicly and privately, what are your worst fears about what may have taken place?
My worst fears among them are that this meeting may have been a prelude or an overture to more coordinated activities involving collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians in their interference in our elections, and that afterward there was obstruction of justice, which is very much front and center and involves also following the money. And that's the other area that I think is important in the meeting this morning, following the money that may have involved transactions between the Russians and the Trump organizations in Moscow, the letter of intent to build a major residential complex, a Trump Tower, or whatever else may have been contemplated, because the Russian playbook is to entangle and compromise foreign officials. And in this instance, may have been a reason that the White House wanted to conceal or deny evidence and may have fired Jim Comey when the FBI was investigating.
So, Senator, obviously, for the audience watching now, he's going to be under oath when he testifies.
He will probably not be put directly under oath in this setting.
Well, then how can you get him for perjury if he's not under oath?
Because the federal statutes make punishable any untruth in these circumstances, as, for example, happened with Poindexter in the Iran-Contra investigation. He was prosecuted similarly for lying to a congressional committee. But put aside that issue, which is an important one, he will presumably be testifying under oath in public. I have, in effect, demanded it. Others on the committee expect it and have insisted on it. And I think that the chairman, who has conducted these hearings in a very impartial, professional, straightforward way, will require Donald Trump Jr. to testify in public under oath. And so this meeting is not the final session when Donald Trump will be answering these questions.
But help me out here. I'm sort of a rank amateur here. I've only sat and watched trials and watched cross-examinations, of course, during the course of my career. Given the level of import of this person appearing at this hearing, why is he not under oath?
Well, that's a good question. In this hearing and in this setting, think of it more like a preparation for the trial, much like a deposition, where a witness may be asked questions and we can use his answers to potentially impeach him when he testifies at the public hearing. In other words, to contradict him. And so the use of the transcript, and I hope the public disclosure of it, will inform the public and enable us to conduct the hearing more effectively.
Senator, that kind of begs the question, though, why not just go ahead and have a public hearing now? Is there really that much that is going to be gleaned from this closed-door session today that is really going to fundamentally change what would be said or done in a public hearing?
It may or it may not change what he says in a public hearing, but it enables us to go into that hearing with more and better information to ask questions of him. The question will be at that public hearing whether he remains consistent.
But Senator Byrd has said already that he doubts that anything new will come out of today. Do you agree with him?
We'll have to see what comes out of today. I never prejudge what a witness is going to say, and Donald Trump Jr. has said various things about that June 9th meeting, about financial dealings, and ultimately the question is, what did the president know and when did he know it?
Mm-hmm.
Senator, when will this process conclude?
I think it will conclude when we conclude that we've uncovered all of the evidence of potential compromises of the Department of Justice. It's our oversight responsibility to determine whether there was any kind of wrongdoing relating to that Department of Justice investigation, and we're going to continue working until we uncover all the evidence that may exist of obstruction of justice, of collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians in interfering in this election, and we're determined to get at the truth.
Senator Richard Blumenthal, thank you very much. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.